Okay, so, all right, rods and reels. 4 ways to help you pick the right fly rod for your multi-species fishing. Rods and reels, fly rods and fly reels have a different system of measuring the rod and reel itself. It's a weight system. Well, you hear a fly fisherman say, well, I'm using a 7 weight rod or an 8 weight rod, or I got me a new 3 weight or whatever. Whereas in bait casting and spinning gear, it's always about, oh, this line, this rod's designed to use 10-pound test line, or it's designed to cast a 3/4 ounce lure. It's not like that in fly fishing, because the lures that we cast are so stinking lightweight, right, that it's basically it's just as well be weightless. Fly fishing is a lightweight system anyway, so you know, even for catching some of the biggest fish in the ocean, the 20-pound test line, they're catching like tuna or something. They're catching, I don't know about that particularly, but you're catching some incredibly big fish on just 20-pound test line. That in freshwater, the kind of fish that you see big cat fishermen using 50-pound test monofilament to catch, a fly fisherman would be using 15 or 20-pound test line to catch that same fish. So it's a light line approach, and so we can't use line weights and the weights of the lures themselves to tell us how strong the rod is. So we have to go to a weight system. You have 3 weight, 4 weight, 5 weight, 6 weight, 7 weight, 8 weight, 9 weight, 10 weight, all the way up to like 12 weight. And they're even down. I think there's even lower weights than that. These micro light weights that are below 3 weight, which it's like fishing on a toothpick. But so how do you know which one to pick? There's plenty of charts available online. Orvis probably has a chart where it says these are the kind of rod weights you want to use for these sorts of fish, whether it be pike or bass or panfish, crappie or trout or salmon or steelhead or and even in saltwater like tarpon and redfish and things like that. And so you can either go by that, but once you I'll try to put a link below, so maybe Orvis or some other places where I found links like that. But the best way I found is, first of all, identify the waters you want to fish. I'm fishing deep, clear, riverine lakes. That's what I'm fishing. I'm not fishing these little shallow little creeks that they fish up north. I'm fishing deep riverine lakes. Sometimes it acts like a river, sometimes it acts like a lake. It's just deep. All right. Whereas a fly fisherman, they might be fishing waters literally from the top of my head down to the ground is about as deep as it is. What is that, like maybe 4 feet or something? And that's as deep as it gets. Whereas out in my waters, it might be 40 feet deep or 20 feet deep or whatever it is. Very deep versus very shallow water where I fish. Are you fishing warm water? Are you fishing cold water? Are you fishing salt water? Identify the main body of water you're going to be on, and that's the first clue as to knowing what size rod, what size reel to buy. Next thing is you want to look at the method you plan to use. Are you going to be doing a lot of sight casting for reds? Are you going to be doing a lot of just dragging the lures behind the boats and drifting and trolling like I do, and very minimal, if any, casting? Okay, are you going to be doing any trolling where it's going to be a deep, heavy bend on the rod all the time? Are you going to be anchored? Are you going to be casting from the bank? Are you going to be casting from the bank where you're very tight to the trees and you're not going to be able to get a good back cast in? You're going to have to roll cast it out all the time. Are you going to be out in the middle of the boat where you can back cast all day long? Are you, are you someone who has a bad shoulder and a one-handed rod is just not going to cut it? You need a two-handed fly rod, those sorts of things. The method that you choose will determine the material that you choose. If you're going to be drifting and trolling, generally fiberglass is going to be a better deal. If you're going to be doing a lot of casting, generally graphite's a better deal. I prefer fiberglass because it's so tough. But graphite is, if I'm going to be doing a lot of drifting, especially if I'm just going to be having one rod, I'm going to be holding that rod all day long, graphite starts to look pretty good in that situation because I'm not really trolling actively, putting a deep bend on it. I'm generally just basically, it's almost like nymphing, except it's just 20 feet down there to the bottom as opposed to 2 feet, and you're moving with the current and the wind in the boat, you know, as opposed to other means and methods. Number 3, like how tough are you on your gear? Me, I'm just tough. I'm tough on my gear, not because I handle the gear roughly, but because sometimes I neglect it. I will leave it, I want to be able to go on a moment's notice, and so I will leave the rod on the boat. But the good thing about fly fishing, because you're only dealing with one rod and reel, it's very easy to put it in something like this, and this can be just dropped, banged up against stuff, and nothing's gonna happen to it. So even if I go graphite, and I may very well go with graphite with my next rod build, I'm just gonna get something like this, either make it out of PVC piping and just break down the rod every time, and I just don't have a problem with that. Now, if you're hard on your gear because you're just catching incredibly big fish, then just go with graphite. Go with fiberglass. I always go with fiberglass. If there's any questions about toughness of the material, just always go with fiberglass, because it's a lot tougher. And today's fiberglasses are actually lighter than the ones that they had back in '70. This rod I have was made back in the 60s or 70s or something. And this thing is heavy as a rock. 4th thing is, do you want to build a rod or buy a rod? Building, I like building. Usually with fly fishermen, once they get into fly tying and they start tying flies and having success with that, usually that first winter or so after they tie their first flies, they'll dabble into rod building a little bit. That's exactly what happened to me. It's a great skill to pick up, because you can build the rod to your specifications and build it exactly the way you want, right? And you can build it well, making sure you get the spine of the rod perfectly aligned and all that kind of thing. And a lot of times they just skip in some big production. But the main thing, you can either build it yourself, you can buy it yourself, or you can pay a custom builder to build it for you. I mean, even the mass-produced rods, they're cheaper, you can get on the water really fast, and where do you buy rods and reels for fly fishing? The best place to get started is just go to a website called AliExpress. It's basically like Amazon, or you can go to Amazon, because a lot of those sellers sell on Amazon as well, and buy you one of these cheap Chinese fly rods. 5, 6, 7 weight's a good weight to get started with. I prefer 7 weight because it's a good all-around, do everything fly rod. It's light enough for bluegill. It's got enough strength for catfish, and I'm happy. It's a good all-around. I'm the type of person who's going to have one rod that does everything, as opposed to have 5 rods that are all specific. I just don't have a lot of money. Give me the 7 weight with a good reel. You can buy some good reels. Now as far as the China-built reels, I've bought some years ago and never had much luck with them. But the 2 reels I have owned, I owned a Temple fork reel, which is probably made in China, but the build quality was much better than a lot of the direct from the Chinese suppliers that I got. Okay, and this reel is Okuma's SLV, which I have used and abused and neglected and all those sorts of things. I just recently broke it down, sort of cleaned it up a little, added some grease to the spool, and it just feels like brand new. I've had it for years now. Now you can always buy vintage fly rods. They're out there on eBay. I bought this Phillips N67 weight from a guy on the old warm water fly fishing website. This guy he does a lot of fly fishing in Texas, I guess in the hill country, where he would fish streamers for striped bass when they run. And I bought this thing, bought it for 150 bucks. Not the cheapest rod, but not the most expensive either. You can easily spend an order of magnitude more money than that on a fly rod. You can easily spend $1,500, $2,000 on a fly rod. This is a Phillips N67 weight fly rod. So, remember I was saying 5, 6, 7 weight's a good rod to start with. I'd rather have the upper end of that. So this is a 6, 7 weight. It is showing its age. It's a little older. This is fiberglass, and I've had to put new eyes on it and things. And it's about time for another sort of rebuild. But I don't really feel like trying to rebuild it, as one of the things if you buy one of these old fly rods like this is that they're very tip heavy, which is not necessarily a bad thing, except for when you have 100 feet of weighted fly line out and the thing just wants to be tip heavy. And these reels are made out of lighter and lighter materials, and they drill all these holes in them, and there's just not enough weight on the back end to really balance it out the way I want. But if you get a modern fly rod and a modern fly reel, you don't have to necessarily worry about balance. A better fly reel with this would probably be like a 9-10 weight instead of a 7-8 weight. But that's just a little aside there. If you just, fly rods are generally longer rods. Fiberglass fly rods generally max out at about 8 feet. Of course, you can get China to make you anything, and there's one importer that I'm considering buying maybe a 10-foot or 13-foot fiberglass spay rod blank to. Fiberglass flexes a lot. It feels a lot more like the old cane pole, and I much prefer it to graphite. Graphite's stiffer and brittle, but if I'm going to be sitting there holding that rod all day long, trolling and drifting, even if I'm not casting, holding that line, trolling and drifting all day long, graphite would be a lot lighter. One more thing. You can put a spinning rod on this thing if you want. Don't let anybody tell you can't put a spinning rod on a fly rod. I've done that many times. You've seen me, right? Because sometimes the river is too deep, the current is too fast, okay? And you just need to get down fast, and having that big, bulky, even weighted fly line just won't sink fast enough. And you may just need to get some lightweight 8-pound test line on a small open-faced reel and get an ounce of lead and just plunk it and get down to the bottom of the river and be done with it. All right. Sometimes you need to do that. That's what you can do with multi-species fly fishing, is you can rig it any way you want. All right. The basis is the fly rod, but not necessarily casting. And remember, I'm always using flies with live bait and commercial bait scents, and rigging it any way possible to catch the fish. I'm pretty sure that's it.